Welcome to the Mystic Media channel. I'm your host, Rabina Rastaban, aka the Realist Astrologer, and I am doing a video reading on Josephine Baker. Now, I was inspired to do this reading on Josephine Baker when I saw that Adrian, one of my Real Talk Astrology Facebook group members, posted a picture of Josephine Baker in honor of her birthday, which was June 3rd. I've always been fascinated by Josephine Baker ever since I saw her images as a child. And I used to have a framed poster of her on my wall. So I'm a big fan of hers. Makes sense because my Mars is in Gemini and she's a Gemini. Now, before I get into the reading, I just wanted to announce that I will be hosting my very first online workshop of my Real Talk Astrology webinar series on Saturday, June 30th. For details and to purchase a ticket, I'm including the Eventbrite link in the description section. Now, virtual seating is limited to only 20, so if you're interested, you're going to want to purchase your ticket as soon as possible. All right, now on to the reading. So, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to read her bio from Wikipedia and I'm going to intersperse it with my commentary about her chart. So let's get started. Josephine Baker, born Frida Josephine McDonald, June 3rd, 1906 to April 12, 1975, was an American-born French entertainer, activist, and French resistance agent. Her career centered primarily in Europe, mostly in her adopted France. So let me just add some commentary right here. So with her being born on the 3rd, that deals with her being an international celebrity. That deals with her relocating to France. It deals with her being an expatriate, renouncing her citizenship, and all that stuff. And it can also deal with her having a big personality, a big image, and also her generosity, and also justice. So all of that is wrapped up into the number 3. During her early career, she was renowned as a dancer and was among the most celebrated performers to headline the revues of the Folies Bergeret in Paris. Her performance in the Revue en Vente des Folies in 1927 caused a sensation in Paris. Her costume, consisting of only a girdle of bananas, became her iconic image and a symbol of the jazz age and the 1920s. So she was a big time star spanning from the 1920s going all the way through to the 60s just about. Baker was celebrated by artists and intellectuals of the era who variously dubbed her the Black Pearl, the Bronze Venus, and the Creole Goddess. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, she renounced her U.S. citizenship and became a French national after her marriage to French industrialist Jean Leon in 1937. Now, about her renouncing her citizenship, like I said, her birth number of 3 speaks a lot about that, but also she has factors in her chart that speak to this as well. Namely, she has Sun conjoined to Jupiter in Gemini, and Jupiter deals with long range travel. It can deal with a long distance relocation. It can deal with you adopting a new homeland. But even more so, Josephine Baker's Venus is in Cancer and is conjoined to Neptune, and they are both at the 9th degree. That 9th degree deals with new foundations, new homeland. So adopting all those children. So she adopted a lot of children. So that's very much Venus conjoined to Neptune in Cancer, because Cancer deals with motherhood. But this also deals with the whole expatriation, her renouncing her citizenship, because Cancer deals with citizenship, deals with nations, nationality. Now, Venus is conjoined to Neptune and it's opposed to Uranus. So that is the actual renouncing of the citizenship. So Uranus is in Capricorn and it is opposing Venus and Neptune. And again, Venus and Neptune are both at the 9th degree. That 9th degree of Cancer can point to adopting a new homeland, being an expatriate, being in a new land, all that good stuff. So also Like I said, the Venus conjoined to Neptune deals with her adopting the children, also deals with her being a dancer, a singer. She was very glamorous, and she basically lived that glamorous life. And Venus conjoined to Neptune is a millionaire aspect. So people that have that aspect, they do have the ability, or I'll say the potential, to become very wealthy. And she was wealthy to the point where she was able to afford a castle. So let me read on. She raised her children in France. I have two loves, the artist once said, my country and Paris. So the fact that she says she has two loves, that is so Gemini. Baker was the first person of color to become a worldwide entertainer and to star in a major motion picture, the 1934 Marc Allegret film Zuzu. Now, about that, her sun in Gemini is in trine to Chiron in Aquarius. And that right there speaks to what I just read. So, again, I'll read it again. Baker was the first person of color to become a worldwide entertainer and to star in a major motion picture. So, that sun trine Chiron in Aquarius, that deals with her breaking the mold, that deals with her being exceptional. And it also deals with the fact that she was almost fully nude in some of her performances, and Aquarius is the sign of nudity. So that sun trine Chiron just basically shows that she didn't have any shame when it came to her body. And to even add to that, her south node is in Aquarius conjoined to Chiron. So that speaks volumes about her not being ashamed and her being semi nude, especially during that time. Now, in France, it was definitely much more acceptable to be for a woman to be topless during performances. In America, things were still more of that Puritan type of culture. So that was like heavily frowned upon in America. So let me read on. Baker refused to perform for segregated audiences in the United States and is noted for her contributions to the civil rights movement. Now, that right there speaks to her South Node in Aquarius, because Aquarius is the sign of the activist. It also speaks to her Chiron in Aquarius. Her Chiron is conjoined to her South Node in Aquarius. So she was a strong, hardcore activist. And just like it says in Wikipedia, she refused to perform for segregated audiences. And she even had some of these nightclubs and some of these venues change their policy just so she could perform. So she was a straight up activist, she was a rebel, and she was also very much about breaking the mold and being unique and basically not really caring what people thought. Even though she kind of did, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. But she basically was about, walking to the beat of her own drum, which is very much Aquarius. So that South Node Aquarius, that Aquarius energy she had was very dominant, especially because Chiron was conjoined to her South Node in Aquarius. Now I'll continue reading. It says, let me see. In 1968, she was offered unofficial leadership in the movement in the United States by Coretta Scott King, following Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. After thinking it over, Baker declined the offer out of concern for the welfare of her children. Now, the interesting thing about Josephine Baker, she didn't have any biological children of her own, and you can see this in her chart because her moon is afflicted by Saturn, and that could deal with a problem with her womb. And also, her sun is in square to Saturn, and that could deal with an inability to have children or sorrow through children, serious challenges through children, even the death of children. And she had several miscarriages. And then eventually she had to get a hysterectomy because her womb became septic and just she developed a horrible infection. So she ended up having to get a hysterectomy. So that her moon in sesquisquare to Saturn points to that hysterectomy. Now, also, let me just continue reading. She was also known for aiding the French resistance during World War II. After the war, she was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French military. Now, if I have any French speaking listeners, please forgive me for butchering the French language. I took French in college actually and got an A. But some of these names I know I'm gonna butcher and mispronounce. So just forgive me. So let me just repeat what I just read. After the war, she was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French military and was named a Chevalier of the Légion d'Honneur by General Charles de Gaulle. Early life. Baker was born as Freda or Frida, I'm not sure, Josephine McDonald in St. Louis, Missouri. Her mother, Carrie, was adopted in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1886 by Richard and Elvira McDonald, both of whom were former slaves of African and Native American descent. Josephine Baker's estate identifies vaudeville drummer Eddie Carson as her natural father despite evidence to the contrary. Now, her mother was a vaudeville performer, and her mother had a boyfriend, Eddie Carson, who was also a vaudeville performer. And her mother said that Eddie Carson was her father, but basically, a lot of people knew that that wasn't her father, and there was speculation that her father was actually a white man, this German man, because her mother used to be a housekeeper for a German family, and during that time she became pregnant. So rumor has it that Josephine Baker is biracial. Her father was a white man, and I can believe it the way she looks. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually the case. And then a testament to this is, again, she has Sun square Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces, and that could deal with confusion surrounding her birth father. So I'm just going to scroll down and read what one of Josephine Baker's adopted son said about Josephine Baker's father. It first starts off by saying Jean-Claude Baker did an exhaustive amount of research into the life of Josephine Baker, including the identity of her biological father. In the book, he discusses at length the circumstances surrounding Josephine Baker's birth. The records of the city of St. Louis tell an almost unbelievable story. They show that Josephine Baker's mother, Carrie McDonald, was admitted to the exclusively white female hospital on May 3, 1906, diagnosed as pregnant. She was discharged on June 17th, her baby Frida J. McDonald having been born 2 weeks earlier. Why 6 weeks in the hospital, especially for a black woman of that time who would customarily have had her baby at home with the help of a midwife? Obviously, there had been complications with the pregnancy, but Carrie's chart reveals no details. The father was identified on the birth certificate simply as EDW. I think Josephine's father was white. So did Josephine. So did her family. People in St. Louis say that Baker's mother had worked for a German family around the time she became pregnant. He's the one who must have got her into that hospital and paid to keep her there all those weeks. Also, her baby's birth was registered by the head of the hospital at a time when most black births were not. I have unraveled many mysteries associated with Josephine Baker, but the most painful mystery of her life, the mystery of her father's identity, I could not solve. The secret died with Carrie, who refused to the end to talk about it. She let people think Eddie Carson was the father, and Carson played along, but Josephine knew better. Now, about the mother keeping that a secret, that deals with um, Josephine Baker's moon in Libra in sesquisquare to Saturn in Pisces. So that's the mother taking that secret to the grave and basically sowing seeds of confusion with respect to Josephine's biological father. So I just thought that was interesting. And this deals with Josephine Baker's South Node in Aquarius because she was born under unusual circumstances, like this paragraph states, because during that time it was more customary for a black woman to give birth at home through a midwife as opposed to a hospital. And it was unusual that she was in that hospital for that length of time. and also that the director of the hospital signed the birth certificate. Or what did it say? It was registered by the head of the hospital at the time when most black births were not. So she was born with unusual circumstances. So that points to that South Node in Aquarius, big time. So let me continue reading. Oh, and let me just say something about vaudeville. So Josephine Baker has a mean stellium in Gemini that consists of her Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars. So Pluto was in Gemini during the time that she was born, and it was in the latter degrees of Gemini. So as this biography states, her mother was a vaudeville dancer. And when you think of vaudeville, let me just pull this up, a description of vaudeville real quick. When you think of when I think of vaudeville performers, I immediately, like, it's just so Gemini to me. So it makes a lot of sense that vaudeville emerged on the scene when Pluto was in Gemini. So let me just read what vaudeville means. A type of entertainment popular chiefly in the United States in the early 20th century, featuring a mixture of specialty acts such as burlesque comedy and song and dance. Also, it is known as a stage play on a trivial theme with interspersed songs. And also, the archaic definition is a satirical or topical song with a refrain. So vaudeville is very much Gemini. So it makes a lot of sense that Pluto was in Gemini during the time she was born. And it continued to be in Gemini for several years after. So that's very interesting. Now going back to her bio. So it says Carrie McDonald, that is Josephine Baker's mother, and Eddie Carson, that was her supposed father, but it was really just the mother's boyfriend, had a song and dance act. And Josephine Baker's moon in Libra points to the mother being a dancer or a performer in general. And also with her North Node in Leo, that just shows that in this lifetime she was destined to be a performer, and it started with her background. It started with her mother. Now, when Josephine was about a year old, they began to carry her on stage occasionally during their finale. So there it is. She was thrust into the world of entertainment from a very early age, 1 year old, and that speaks of that North Node in Leo, because Leo is the sign of entertainment. It is the sign of the performer. She was further exposed to show business at an early age because her childhood neighborhood was home to many vaudeville theaters that double as movie houses. That's Gemini too. Vaudeville theaters that double as movie houses. Her bio has Gemini written all over it. These venues included Jazzland, Booker T. Washington, and Comet Theaters. Josephine lived her early life at 212 Targhee Street. Even that address is Gemini, the 212. Targhee Street, known by some St. Louis residents as Johnson Street. Okay, that's Gemini too, because it's like it went by two different names. Just crazy. You can't make this stuff up. In the Mill Creek Valley neighborhood of St. Louis, a racially mixed, low-income neighborhood, racially mixed, that's Gemini, near Union Station, consisting mainly of rooming houses, brothels, and apartments with no indoor plumbing. That's like Jupiter and Gemini in particular, with the whole racially mixed low income neighborhood, and she has Sun conjoined to Jupiter and Gemini. Josephine was always poorly dressed and hungry as a child, and developed street smarts playing in the railroad yards of Union Station. Now the whole street smarts thing, that's Gemini all day. And the fact that she was always poorly dressed and hungry as a child, that points to her Cancer energy, but it also points to the fact that her sun is in square to Saturn. That sun square Saturn can basically point to being destitute, being poor, or at least growing up poor, a life of poverty, hard struggle. Sun square Saturn people could go through like a serious hard life, like it's no joke. So It also says she had little formal education and attended Lincoln Elementary School only through the 5th grade. But with that stellium in Gemini, it's like, she didn't need that much education because, that's where learning through observation and also the street smarts came in. Now it goes on to say that Josephine's mother married a kind but perpetually unemployed man, Arthur Martin, with whom she had a son, Arthur, and 2 more daughters, Marguerite and Willie. She took in laundry to wash to make ends meet, and at 8 years old, Josephine began working as a living domestic for white families in St. Louis. One woman abused her, burning Josephine's hands when the young girl put too much soap in the laundry. Now that shows up in Josephine's chart through her Mars in Gemini, because that deals with the hands. That alone deals with the hands, like injury to the hands. I got Mars in Gemini, so trust me. Matter of fact, now that I look at it, my Mars is conjoined to her Mars. No wonder why I had a picture of her on my wall. And no wonder why I've always been like fascinated by her and drawn to her. Our Mars are only 2 degrees apart. My Mars is at the 26th degree of Gemini. Her Mars is at the 24th degree. So I can attest to the hand injuries, the cuts, the nails, like getting bad nail injuries and stuff like that. Now she had it even worse because one woman abused her, burning her hands when she was a young girl because she put too much soap in the laundry. Now again, that deals with her Mars in Gemini, but her Mars is conjoined to Pluto. So that's where the abuse comes in. So if you have Mars in Gemini alone, you're prone to injuries of the hands or the arms. But it could be things that you cause yourself, like through accidents and stuff. But when you have Pluto in the mix, that is coming from an outside party. So that is somebody abusing you. So that points to her being abused by that lady by getting her hands burnt. By age 12, she had dropped out of school. At 13, she worked as a waitress at the Old Chauffeurs Club at 3133 Pine Street. Even that address is very Gemini. She also lived as a street child in the slums of St. Louis, sleeping in cardboard shelters, scavenging for food in garbage cans, making a living with street corner dancing. Amazing. So that can speak to, that deals with her Venus conjoined to Neptune, because Neptune is a planet of homelessness. And because that conjunction is in Cancer, that's a literal interpretation of her spending time being homeless with the cardboard shelter. And like I said, with her Sun square Saturn, that just points to growing up like hard, like life of poverty, being destitute. And then her moon is in sesquisquare to Saturn, and that deals with growing up hard as well, not having enough to eat, starvation, or, being malnourished. So she had a very, very tough upbringing. It was no joke. And then also, let me see what that. Yeah, so she had it pretty bad. So let me finish. Okay, it was at the Old Chauffeurs Club where Josephine met Willie Wells and married him the same year. So she was first married at the age of 13. But back then, that was more common. Like, it was actually my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, got married when she was 13. So I could definitely relate in terms of my family with me having a grandmother that got married that young. So yeah, that would happen because kids grew up fast back in the day because they expected kids to work and to earn their keep and all types. It was like you really didn't have a childhood. It's like childhood really didn't exist until like maybe like the 1950s, maybe. So in Baker's teen years, she struggled to have a healthy relationship with her mother, Carrie McDonald, who did not want Josephine to become an entertainer and scolded her for not tending to Baker's second husband, Willie Baker, whom she had married in 1921 at age 15. So she first married Willie Wells. Oh my God, this is so Gemini. She first married Willie Wells at age 13, and then she married another Willie at age 15, but then she had a brother named Willie. So this is so Gemini, because Gemini will replicate things and it deals with multiples, and it's just crazy. But it also deals with that Cancer energy too, because Cancer deals with mirroring. Now, although she left Willie Baker when her vaudeville troupe was booked into a New York City venue and divorced him in 1925, it was during this time she began to see significant career success, and she continued to use his last name professionally for the rest of her life. Now that's very North Node in Leo, because with the North Node in Leo in the lifetime that she led, she was supposed to become well acquainted with men. She was supposed to become familiar with men because she wasn't familiar with men in past lives. So the fact that she got married early makes a lot of sense. And also the fact that she took one of her husband's last names and kept it because she was beginning to become famous with that last name. That speaks of that North Node in Leo. Okay. Though Baker traveled, then returned with gifts and money for her mother and younger half sister, the turmoil with her mother pushed her to make a trip to France. So the turmoil with her mother points to her moon again in sesquisquare to Saturn, and also her moon in sesquisquare to her sun. Early years. Baker's street corner dancing attracted attention, leading to her being recruited for the St. Louis Chorus vaudeville show at the age of 15. That's when she was performing in blackface. If you Google Josephine Baker, you could find some of her images of when she was in blackface and when she had to act like a buffoon and all that type of stuff. And that was the reason why her mother didn't want her to be a performer, an entertainer, because she thought she couldn't foresee Josephine Baker going to France. She could only see her being in America, which makes sense because, black people back then didn't have many opportunities. So who could really imagine Josephine Baker ending up in France? But her mother didn't want her to become a performer because she didn't want her to have to perform in blackface and all that stuff. So it was a pride thing for her mother. And again, that goes to her North Node in Leo. Now it says Baker performed as the last dancer. This is so Gemini right here, what I'm about to read. So Baker performed as the last dancer on the end of the chorus line, where her act was to perform in a comic manner, as if she were unable to remember the dance, until the encore, at which point she would perform it not only correctly, but with additional complexity. Baker was billed at the time as the highest paid chorus girl in vaudeville. So she has broken some records. She's broken the mold. And again, this goes back to her sun and trine to Chiron. Let me just check the time. I'm already at 28 minutes. Wow. Now, it says that her career began with blackface, as I mentioned, blackface comedy at local clubs. This was the entertainment of which her mother had disapproved. However, these performances landed Baker an opportunity to tour in Paris, which would become the place she called home until her final days. Baker sailed to Paris for a new venture and opened in La Revue Negre on October 2nd, 1925, age 19. In Paris, she became an instant success for her erotic dancing and for appearing practically nude on stage. So again, I go back to what I said, that deals with her South Node in Aquarius, because Aquarius is a sign of nudity. It also deals with her Chiron in Aquarius conjoined to that South Node, but you can also point to her Uranus in Capricorn, because Uranus rules Aquarius, that deals with nudity as well, opposing her Venus and Neptune. So that could deal with her having racy costumes. Baker performed the Danse Sauvage, wearing a costume consisting of a skirt made of a string of artificial bananas. Her success coincided with the Exposition des Arts Décoratifs, which gave birth to the term Art Deco. Oh my God, I love Art Deco. If you don't know what Art Deco looks like, Google it, because I love that type of art. And it's the epitome of Josephine Baker. Like, Josephine Baker goes hand in hand with the whole Art Deco movement. Baker represented one aspect of this fashion. In later shows in Paris, she was often accompanied on stage by her pet cheetah that would deal with her Venus conjoined to Neptune, because Neptune deals with wild animals. Chiquita, who was adorned with a diamond collar. The cheetah frequently escaped into the orchestra pit where it terrorized the musicians, adding another element of excitement to the show. And the cheetah deals with her North Node in Leo as well, because Leo deals with cats. So it's like, again, you can't make this stuff up. After a while, Baker was the most successful American entertainer working in France. So again, her breaking the molds. Ernest Hemingway called her the most sensational woman anyone ever saw. Baker starred in 3 films, which found success only in Europe. At this time, she scored her most successful song, J'ai du amour. At the start of her career in France, Baker met a Sicilian former stonemason who passed himself off as a count, who persuaded her to let him manage her. Giuseppe Pepito Apatino. I could see, like, if you ever seen that movie, Lynn Whitfield plays Josephine Baker, but it's the Josephine Baker story. It's like I'm seeing this with my mind's eye, the way the guy looks and everything, because I remember this part of the movie when she met Giuseppe. The two could not marry due to Baker still being married to her second husband, Willie Baker. Under the management of Apatino, Baker's stage and public persona, as well as her singing voice, were transformed. In 1934, she took the lead in a revival of Jacques Offenbach's opera La Creole, which premiered in December of that year for a 6-month run at the Theatre Marigny at the Champs-Élysées of Paris. Champs-Élysées of Paris. I better get that right. In preparation for her performances, she went through months of training with a vocal coach. Let me just skip past. Despite her popularity in France, Baker never attained the equivalent reputation in America. Now, that deals with several aspects in her chart. So again, it goes back to her Venus conjoined to Neptune in Cancer, opposing that Uranus in Capricorn, where she's getting love, she's cherished in one nation, but in her home nation, she is ostracized. She is, not appreciated. She's even disrespected and ridiculed. And this also deals with the moon in sesquisquare to Saturn as well. So it says her star turn in a 1936 revival of Siegfried Follies on Broadway generated less than impressive box office numbers, and later in the run, she was replaced by Gypsy Rose Lee. Time magazine referred to her as a Negro wench whose dancing and singing might be topped anywhere outside of Paris, while other critics said her voice was too thin and dwarf-like to fill the Winter Garden Theater. She returned to Europe heartbroken. So, like I said, while she had that South Node in Aquarius conjoined to Chiron, that could make her not give a fuck. Excuse my French. No pun intended. No pun actually intended. With that North Node in Leo, in this lifetime, she was supposed to develop more of a heart and to have passion, to have feelings, and to, to care. So that was that North Node in Leo being opposed to that Chiron, like her receiving those harsh reviews from the American media and her being heartbroken as she returned to Europe. Now, Baker returned to Paris in 1937, married the French industrialist Jean Lyon, and became a French citizen. So again, I talked about her adopting France as her new country. So I already talked about those aspects. But also, how about the fact that she married outside of her race and also outside of her nationality, and that deals with Venus conjoined to Neptune opposing Uranus, and also the moon in sesquisquare to Saturn, as well as the moon in sesquisquare to the sun in Gemini. Now, Gemini is one of those signs that's very flexible and open-minded. So it is one of the signs that is more conducive to a marriage that is interracial or that is multinational, what have you. Capricorn is another sign that can deal with someone who dates outside their race as well. Sagittarius is another. And she has Sagittarius on her fourth house cusp. Now her birth time is approximate. It's by off of someone's memory. So I'm gonna go with this birth time because it makes perfect sense. Because with her Sagittarius on the fourth, it makes perfect sense because she's an expatriate. She relocated to France, and the fourth house deals with your home. So in September 1939, when France declared war on Germany in response to the invasion of Poland, Baker was recruited by the, I'm not going to even try to pronounce that, Bureau, French military intelligence as an honorable correspondent. Baker collected what information she could about German troops. Basically, make a long story short, she became a spy for the French resistance during World War II. And that deals with a few factors in her chart. Her Mars conjoined to Pluto in Gemini. That deals with her being that spy and getting that information, that covert intelligence, being an intelligence operative. And also her Venus conjoined to Neptune. Neptune deals with secrecy, and that deals with her being a celebrity, a starlet, and how she was able to be let through certain countries and stuff and sit at the table of certain dignitaries and stuff because she was cherished like that, and she was able to get information that way. So she would even hide things in her dress. I need to just read what they wrote because it's interesting, because this speaks especially about this Venus conjoined to Neptune. Oh, here it was. Oh, yes, this is so dope. So it says, when the Germans invaded France, Baker left Paris and went to the Chateau de Milan, her home in the south of France. She housed people who were eager to help the Free French effort led by Charles de Gaulle, and supplied them with visas. As an entertainer, Baker had an excuse for moving around Europe. So that's what I'm talking about with the Venus conjoined to Neptune. Visiting neutral nations such as Portugal, as well as some in South America. She carried information for transmission to England about airfields, harbors, and German troop concentrations in the west of France. Notes were written in invisible ink on Baker's sheet music. So that's that Venus conjoined to Neptune in Cancer. That deals with the music, but it also deals with the secrecy. And if her birth time is in the ballpark, or if it's accurate, her Venus and Neptune are in sextile to her Virgo ascendant, and that can deal with her helping France basically get information by her hiding things on her in her sheet music. She would even hide things in her dresses, like hide little notes and stuff. I'm trying to get to that part. Oh, I can't find it. For lack of time, I'm going to just read on. But here's the part about her miscarriages. So later in 1941, she and her entourage went to the French colonies in North Africa. The stated reason was Baker's health, since she was recovering from another case of pneumonia, but the real reason was to continue helping the resistance. From a base in Morocco, she made tours of Spain. She penned notes with the information she gathered inside her underwear. There it is right there. Counting on her celebrity to avoid a strip search. She met the Pasha of Marrakech, whose support helped her through a miscarriage, the last of several. After the miscarriage, she developed an infection so severe it required a hysterectomy. The infection spread and she developed peritonitis, and then septicemia. After her recovery, which she continued to fall in and out of, she started touring to entertain British, French, and American soldiers in North Africa. So her last marriage was to a French composer and conductor, Joe Bouillon, and it ended around the time Baker opted to adopt her 11th child. Now, the interesting thing about her chart, she adopted 12 children in all, and her sun is at the 12th degree of Gemini, and her Chiron is at the 12th degree of Aquarius, conjoined to herself, noted in Aquarius. So that 12, you can even look at degrees in natal charts to show significant numbers of things or significant ages, all that type of stuff. Astrology is real like that. So her sun being at the 12th degree points to her adopting those 12 children, but it also points to her being an expatriate, traveling all around the world, and basically being like larger than life, and also excess. So she had an excessive personality, and it speaks to her having the adopting those 12 children and living beyond her means, because eventually her castle was foreclosed and she was forcibly removed from her home. And again, that points to that Venus conjoined to Neptune opposing Uranus, because that conjunction between Venus and Neptune is in Cancer, and opposing Uranus and Capricorn, that could deal with the authorities ousting you from your home. So a few more things before I end this video. She has Saturn opposition Nemesis, which can deal with her working to thwart the enemy in the time of war, but it can also deal with the racism that she faced throughout her life. Trying to think what else. So I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Oh, I'm missing one of the most important parts. Oh my God. So, her bisexuality. Boom. She was well known to be a bisexual, maybe not to the mainstream back in the day, but once people, researched her bio and stuff, she wasn't secretive really about her sexuality. She was quite open about it. And she dated several women, including this one blues singer named Clara Smith. And it was rumored that she even had a brief relationship with Frida Kahlo, that artist. So that speaks to her stellium in Gemini, especially her Mars conjoined to Pluto in Gemini. Gemini is one of those open-minded, flexible signs. Gemini is one of the indicators of homosexuality or bisexuality. Bisexuality in particular. But also, again, going back to Venus conjoined to Neptune, opposing Uranus. That right there is a lesbian aspect as well. I would probably venture to say with her South Node in Aquarius, she probably preferred women to men. Simply because of that South. And if you saw a couple of my other videos, I talk about the Leo Aquarius lunar nodal axis being the gay lunar nodal axis, because a lot of people that are born with this lunar nodal axis, they will have some type of involvement or connection with the LGBTQ community. And Josephine Baker is no exception. She also had Moon trine Pluto, that deals with her being a mother to other people's children. She had Moon trine Mars, that deals with her making a new homeland, establishing new foundations in France. She had Venus trine Saturn, that deals with her being a professional dancer, a singer, also the adoptions because Saturn's in Pisces. Also, let me see what else. I think I basically covered everything that I wanted to cover. So that is my reading on Josephine Baker. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Like I said, I've always been fascinated by Josephine ever since I was a kid. And I was at the library and I saw the pictures of her and I was like, wow, she's so glamorous. And I remember seeing the nudie pictures of her and being like, wow, like, her breasts were perfect and stuff like that. So yeah, I've always been fascinated by Josephine Baker, and she's definitely an iconic woman of history, not just Black history, world history, not just American history, world history, and that's a testament of her being a 3 in terms of birth number. Her life path number is a 25, breaks down to 7. That deals with her being, the artist, the dancer, all that. But that 25 can lead to one's downfall if the person is not being conscientious, especially in terms of money, or if the person is just not being attentive. It could cause the person to be unrealistic, and she definitely was, because she was in denial when her castle was being foreclosed, and like I said, they had to forcibly remove her from her home. So that's my reading on Josephine Baker. If you would like a reading, you could go to my website at rabina.com. Peace and many blessings.